Welcome back to a conversation about. Today, one of my fellow classmates, Kevin, joins us. We're going to be talking about politics and our experience through maybe last election, our thoughts on politics, anything else kind of related. So, Kevin, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to start by asking you about your experience in this last legislative session. I know you worked in the Texas House, so could you just kind of like walk me through some of your like thoughts, perceptions, any like key takeaways, just the general experience?
Yeah, where do I start? 87th was a nightmare.
Yeah, I can imagine.
A lot of the legislation was just a lot of really, really like conservative legislation. Texas is an R+5, and the legislation that was coming through was like an R+30. It was insane.
Oh, wow.
Constitutional carry, the abhorrent abortion bill, the voting rights bill, or the election integrity as they call
Yes.
it. What else? Camping ban, the camping ban bill, and riding bill as well. The one where like you can't, if you get hit by a truck or something on a highway because you're protesting, you get in trouble or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, all the legislation was just horrible.
Yeah, I can imagine there was a lot of frustration, especially, this cycle more than any, because like you're seeing these things go through, and at a certain point you got to ask yourself, like, what can you do about it? And like, so what do you think was like the general mood around your peers when you were in Congress, if that makes sense?
No, yeah, a lot of us, as we call it, it was the suppressing session.
Yeah,
it was terrible because all the legislation was going through, and there was nothing we really could do. Because we're in the minority, so all we can do is delay.
Yeah, was there this feeling? Yeah, and you guys did delay, which I really applaud for that. I think it's the second time in recent modern history that Dems do that in the Texas House. I think somewhere in like 2002 or something they did the same thing where they so like, was there this general feeling of like helplessness? You're like, we're just like doing what we can to slow down this train, but it's not stopping.
Yeah. We would, something in the ledges we can call a point of order. And our office, other office would do research or like try to find an issue with the bill or with the way it was conducted to call a point of order to get the bill killed. But for whatever reason, the parliamentarian wouldn't rule in our favor. So
really,
yeah.
And so I know in like the federal House and federal Congress, the parliamentarian isn't really like an elected official. How does that work in Texas politics, or is that too much to ask? Maybe I should have looked into that a little more.
No, yeah, I don't know how the process is, but I believe it's not an elected position.
Okay.
I think the House like Speaker or the House itself maybe votes on a parliamentarian. I think that's how the process is.
So like an interesting thing I found out, and this is like completely off topic, but now that you mentioned the House Speaker, is that the House Speaker doesn't have to be an elected member of Congress.
No.
And I thought that was like so interesting. Like, I wonder if maybe like that was just overlooked. They assumed that was going to be the case, but like I would like to envision a world where like someone that wasn't elected to Congress becomes Speaker of the House. I think that would be like really, really cool. Just like the dynamics of that, I think would be cool. But that's completely off topic. So I know you worked on I guess at least one campaign over the last election cycle. I don't know, did you work on one before COVID started, or was it like all after COVID? Because I know before COVID, it was really like primary kind of stuff. And like, I guess for campaigns around Austin, like they were really picking up too. There was a lot of primaries, but like, did you happen to work in that, or was it like post-COVID?
No, yeah, it was towards the end of 2020. Okay. So in around like October-ish.
Okay, so like right before
after
season.
primaries. Yeah. So I didn't really get to experience that, but we're getting ready to go into one now, so I'll get to get the experience.
We're ramping up
primary now.
Yeah, I'm really hoping to be like involved in this upcoming primaries. I did primaries before the pandemic started, and it was just so different. Like, and as you can imagine, like the world before COVID was so different. But I don't even know if it was like for better or for worse, because one of the things I talked about with my candidate was that, sure, we're doing less like in-person contact with people, but that also frees up resources and opportunities to be able to reach more people. So instead of like getting volunteers to like knock on doors, we drop literature, we drop cards and stuff, and we could like hit apartment complexes, hit houses so much faster if we didn't have to talk to the people. So like we reached more people, we were able to, I guess, send funds over to like digital ads and this kind of stuff. So the dynamic was really interesting because, I mean, there was more phone banking as you have experience with that, which I absolutely hate. I didn't mind knocking on doors, but I hated calling people. And I don't know if this was your experience, but whatever software we used, when you call, there's like a delay, so the person answers before you actually get ringed in, if that makes sense.
No, yeah.
And that was like, that caught me so off guard. Like, I could only imagine the person on the other side and how awkward that was for him. I don't know if like that was the case for you. I know a lot of people did like texting stuff. I don't know if you did that as well.
So I didn't get a chance to do texting, but I'm doing texting now.
Okay.
With the stuff going on, the No Way on A. Mm-hmm. So I've got texting experience on my belt now.
Yeah. So what is your experience with texting? Because ours was wild.
Yeah. I've got a couple of interesting texts. I don't know if you're like familiar with Van.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like I had one person was like, you know, what Van code do you have me under that's got you texting me? And I was like caught off my guard by that. I have other like say like, Hail Hitler, stuff like that. And I'm just like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. All kinds of stuff, man. Like all kinds of responses. And so what we found interesting was, how do I say this? We thought we were texting a certain demographic of people, but we were actually texting a different political ideology party. And so, like, the responses were just awful, man. Like, F you, all of them. Like, some really, really, like, you know, I don't want to say scary, but, like, out-of-line stuff.
Yeah, very concerning.
Very concerning. Yeah. And it's like, and a lot of them were like, you know, how did you get this number? A lot of them were kind of shocked. And then a lot of people were like, well, I'm on the do not text list. There's like an FCC list or whatever you can sign up for that makes you like, makes you to where like solicitors don't like text you and call you, but like getting the point across that you're not soliciting, you're canvassing and campaigning, and that's protected by the First Amendment was so difficult to get to voters. I don't know if that was like something that you experienced as well.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I had a couple of people that were like, I'm on the do not call list. I've been called by you people hundreds of times. Do not call me. So on and so forth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had that same experience. I'm just like, okay, I'll opt you out and just move on with my day.
And I don't know if that was for you, but like for me, that was a little like, what's the word? Like, kind of a letdown too. Like I would imagine, especially like a state in Texas, like, well, I guess not. Let me not say. I was gonna say at least like more people would be open to like receiving this kind of stuff, but no. Especially when you're like flat out say, hey, I'm working for this Dem, and you're testing an R. They're obviously gonna reply back. But I think to myself like, if I ever got one of those texts, I would just ignore it. Like I was so surprised that like people actually like had something to say back. I'm like, dude, just ignore it.
Yeah, but, yeah. I mean, if I ever got like if I ever got a text from a Republican, I wouldn't say fuck you or anything like that. I would just okay. Whatever.
Swipe, delete.
Yeah,
Move
on my day.
And that was one of the biggest things. But so I want to ask you what your perspective was on like younger people participating in politics. So I follow a lot of like Twitch streamers, YouTube commentators that kind of do like political discourse. Some of them are younger, some of them are older, and like there's this general talk when like older people are talking to younger people that are like, oh, you just don't know, you know, like you're too young, you haven't experienced everything, you know. And when I visited Democratic clubs for when I was running, you know, helping run a campaign, we had to visit a lot of Democratic clubs and stuff, you know, try to make contacts with stuff, like ask for money and all these other things, right? And like typically the people that attended those Democratic clubs were a little bit older, and like some of the conversations there, like when we talked about, I know this last election season, the term, you know, this is the most consequential election in modern history was thrown around a lot, like everything hangs on this. what I found interesting that some of the other people were like, yeah, but we've heard that term like in 5 other elections.
Yeah.
You know, like every election cycle is going to be the most consequential. So there was like a sense of like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about yet. Like you just haven't experienced so much. And like, what do you think about that? Like, what was your experience, and what do you think about like us not being like experienced enough?
No, at first I would say everyone has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
You have to start somewhere. But I think the one thing that youth have over older people is a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
As you get older, you experience things, obviously, so you do get experience. But that wires you to think in a certain way, in which I think being young is an asset because you don't have those experiences, so your brain doesn't think that way. So you might see something that an older person might not. So for someone to say, wait your turn, or you don't know what you're talking about, I don't know. Sometimes it might be more beneficial to listen.
Yeah, I think so too, because we are growing up in a much different world than the people before us. Like just different ideologies. We're more open to stuff. In general, younger people are more open to stuff naturally, right? So it's like, yeah, we do have a different perspective. Like, that's not to say we can like get up on a pedestal and say like, oh, we know everything, because we don't. Obviously, we're young, but I mean, you're right. Like, we have a different perspective, and one of the things I find interesting is that like we also have the energy to do it. Like we're young, we're in college, we want to be active, we want to participate, we want to make a change. I think as people grow older, they get more, I don't want to say complacent, but like they get more used to the surroundings, and they're like, well, I did that stuff in high school, I did that stuff in college, but now I have a family, and like I can't be out going to protests every day because I have more important things to worry about. And, like, one of the things that we have to our advantage is that energy and that determination to be able to do it. And I don't know, that's why I really like, as I pass and walk through campus, and I see these protests, and I see like people rallying together, advocating for stuff, having speeches in front of the tower and stuff. I'm like, good for you, I regret that I haven't joined enough organizations and clubs and participated enough, but I really appreciate like when you're tabling for UDEMs and stuff. Like I really appreciate seeing that on campus.
No, yeah, a lot of. It's good to see a lot of orgs doing that because they're engaged in the process. They care about their communities, which is always important. Because, stuff that comes through might not be something that you like laws. So it's good to be involved in the process because you might be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're like engaged in that kind of stuff, you kind of like have your own perspective in it too. Like, when you see a good piece of legislation passed that you like helped advocate for, you kind of like feel like, wow, I contributed to that, and like that's very like self-rewarding. And I think a lot of people these days are like really not engaged in politics. Like they really have this idea that like, oh well, there's corrupt politicians and they're gonna do whatever they want. So like, does my vote really matter, and this kind of stuff. And like, I mean, honestly, yes, your vote does matter. Like even,
of course,
yeah. I mean, it's just this ideology, like the political efficacy, like goes down quite a bit, especially in these times. You hear, I mean, you see people getting fighting on Facebook and stuff over some like dumb thing, and like you see that, and you're like, well, that's all politics ever is. It's like people just arguing about things, but like it's so much more than that. And I always encourage people to be more involved in politics because, at least at a local level, you can like really see a difference. And like if you back the right candidates, or the candidate you feel is going to do the right thing, not even the right candidate, but like someone you advocate for, or you would advocate for, I think that's like really rewarding when you see them win. And that gets people more engaged because politics, I like to say this a lot, like politics is everything. Like even if you try to stay outside of politics, it affects you in some way.
No, yeah. Especially those local races.
Yeah.
Local government has the most direct impact on your life. And they're vastly different than even state or federal. Federal and state, it's a lot more partisan, blue, red, Democrat, Republican. But local, a lot of the races are nonpartisan. So it's very interesting, very different dynamics, which is why it's very interesting to see people get involved because I'll take Save Austin for now. I don't know if you know that. The group that's like pushing through the not No Way, but they're trying to push through Prop A.
Yeah.
And I think the chairwoman or whatever, she claims to be a Democrat. She says she's a Democrat. She's voted and claims that she's voted in the Democratic primary, but is passing through Republican initiatives. So local politics are very, very complex.
Yeah, they're very, how do you say, like, they're multidimensional.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's where I think a lot of people can get involved, is all we hear about is, who's running against Ted Cruz or something. And that's super partisan because, Ted Cruz is a certain person. Whoever's running against him is probably the exact opposite. And so you have to pick and choose. But like you said, like in local politics, it's so much more complex that you could be voting for a Dem that has like some Republican values or a Republican that has some Dem values, And it's like, I think that opens up your mind to saying, you know what, maybe all Republicans aren't bad. Maybe all Dems aren't, socialist communists, and, all Republicans aren't, fascists and all this stuff, And I think we create this twisted sense of reality when we only look at the big congressional federal races, whether that be Senate or the House, or even just look at discourse on social media. We become so disconnected with the real world when we do that. Like when we look at the local places, the local elections and stuff, that's when we really get to see, okay, maybe people aren't all one way and all the other way, and you can kind of see those dynamics.
No, I think what's very interesting with local races too is that because they're so multidimensional, sometimes as a new person getting into politics, you don't know where to begin because I know for me when I first, because I came from UT Tyler, I transferred here last year. I didn't know Austin politics. I mean, I know Austin politics more than I know my hometown Fort Worth politics, and that's just because it's so different. I'm interested. I'm trying to learn every facet of it and learn the inner workings of it. So with local, you really got to pay attention.
Yeah, and that changes city to city, like you said. I come from the Houston area, and it's so vastly different. Just because Austin is so much smaller than Houston too, and you can spend your life in a part of Houston and never really see the other side. And the state congressional district that I participated in or helped run a campaign in had a mix of really rural, suburban, and then very much urbanized. And
was this for the state house or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we ran in State House District 130, which I think has been divided up now quite a bit after the lines were drawn.
Yeah, probably.
Making it much more safer towards the Republican, but it was already a safe Republican, a safe Republican district. And that, what was kind of a downer was how bad we performed this last election cycle. So I support Dems, I'm not a Republican, but I also am not blind to the faults of the Democratic Party, and it wasn't there this year.
And I think there's actually a valid reason for this. Republicans were, they were obviously going out canvassing, whereas Dems didn't really canvass as much. I mean, sure we did lid drops, but we weren't talking to voters. Yeah. And I mean, I'm no campaign expert. I've never ran a campaign before. I don't think I ever will. But I think there's something with talking to voters that might be more, beneficial than maybe phone banking or text banking or lip dropping. While all three useful, I think canvassing, and that, I don't know if I heard that from someone. I think there was a candidate in Austin or some politician or something like that. So that was probably the reason why we didn't perform, and that's probably why we didn't do well, not just here but across the whole country.
Yeah, you know what? I agree too, and I think the major backing for that is the pandemic in general. Republican response versus Democratic response to the pandemic was vastly different, where Democrats were more likely to say, you know what, we don't want any contact. We'll do lit drops, we'll text people, we'll message people. And while we reached more people, the connections weren't the same.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that right off the bat. Before, when we were campaigning for the primaries and we were knocking on doors, people were really excited to see this. Like, to the point that like sometimes we had like 30-minute conversations with people outside of their house. It's because what was interesting is like people were telling us, this is the first time we've ever been contacted by anybody running, a candidate running, and so they love to like just like tell us what was going on. And one of the interesting thing was that some of them told us that like, yeah, sometimes we vote Dem for this, sometimes we vote Republicans for this specific position. Either we know the person or we've been following them and stuff. And those like in-person connections, I think were very valuable. And I think that's something like the Republican Party capitalized on. Whether that was a good thing to capitalize on, given that we were in a pandemic, still are in a pandemic, that's neither here nor there. I guess everyone has a different outlook on that, but I mean, it definitely proves somewhat effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think another reason is what I like to call the Trump effect. Mm-hmm. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, when he's on the ballot, things are very unique. Because I mean, in 2016, mm-hmm. There was an extremely high turnout.
Yeah,
a lot more than what was expected from the polls. And in 2018, whenever he's not on the ballot, Dems do really well because obviously they there's a strong rally against Donald.
Yeah.
So the turnout was, and when turnout's pretty high, it's usually good for Democrats. So they took back the House, and I think a few seats in the Senate, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how they did, but in 2020, I mean we barely held the House, we barely held the Senate, and I mean I was like when I saw the results back on election night, immediately it said we won the House. So I was like, okay. And I was expecting us to pick up like maybe 15 seats. That's what I thought. I didn't think we would hold by 3 seats. And I don't know. Whenever he's on the ballot, just turnout is higher. People who don't vote show up and vote for him.
So,
or his.
So it's like, what's interesting about him and like this kind of like populism approach is like, I mean, and you can see it like even after he lost the election. Like he spent 4 years, even prior to that, let's say he spent 5 years telling his base, the people in power are trying to take your country away from you. They're letting such and such people in. They're doing so many things to take this country from you. And like while you're repeating that message for 4 years, like it starts to incite this kind of anger. Like, wow, they are taking my country from me. And that's one thing that I always like wish the Dems could do better, is like create a more like unified message, because everybody could get behind Trump. All his supporters could get behind him because he had this very particular brand. Everybody knew MAGA hats, Dems, you have Joe Manchin to Bernie Sanders. You have like a completely wide scope of
it's a big tent party.
Yeah.
But I mean, wow, they did rally against Donald. Like,
yeah.
When it came to against Donald Trump, everyone rallied. There was no like break. But I mean, obviously, as we're seeing now, with the Buildback Better Act and all that mess, it's a complete chaos in the party right now. But there was unified opposition against Donald. So it was good while it lasted.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that because it came to be like Trump versus democracy at some point. Like that's really like what it broke down to, and I don't know, like his base was still there, and like thankfully Dems turned out and stuff. I can't vote, so I don't participate in something. I wasn't born here, and I'm not a citizen yet. I'm legally here, but I'm not a citizen yet, so I can't vote. So like there's a lot of aspects of that where I'm a little disengaged, but one of the things I found interesting was like, thankfully Dems turned out, right? But for a second there, it was getting a little close, and it's like, come on guys, like there's more Dems, there's more of us out there, like come on, you guys need to be showing up, because we can't have another 4 more years.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Biden messaging at the time, and Kamala, the vote like your life depended on it, because it really did. Yeah. It really did depend on it.
Yeah.
And luckily and happily, we did win. We took Georgia. We love Georgia. And I don't know. I mean, he's talking about coming back, but I don't know. What party runs a failed candidate?
Yeah. The sad part is the sad part is like there's still people supporting him.
Mm-hmm.
The great part is that there's not that many people anymore. And yeah, like who backs a failed candidate? Who backs an old failed candidate who's like launching another social media app that's probably gonna fail? So it's like, hopefully he's done for. The thought now is like, where do we go from here? Like, what is like, how do we move forward? You know, like, you're involved more in like student organizations on campus and stuff. Like, is there like a general kind of like trend or thought or ideology of like, okay, like this is what we'd like to see in the future? Or are we just like taking a breather and saying, you know what, last 4 years were rough. Let's like figure out what we want. Let's take a breath. Let's see what we can do right now, and like we'll put off, you know, high hopes for the future, and like just so we can regroup.
Yeah, I mean, so I think politically and like country wise, and not just limited like the whole country, but like people in UDEMs that I know, want change, want, you know, progressive values, want,
Right.
you know, better things. After the last 4 years, we've seen stallment on things.
Yeah.
And then we
Or
have a pandemic.
rollbacks on
Yeah,
stuff,
or rollbacks. Then we have a pandemic that causes, you know, the greatest economic, I guess, I don't even know if you would call it a recession, depression, whatever, but greatest since, you know, it was worse than 08, but not as bad as the Great Depression. It was in that middle ground. So beats the Great Recession that we had in 08. If people want change, they want healthcare. Healthcare, very important right now. I think that's a sentiment that's shared by campus. Better education, and values like that. But I think that while these are, you know, the things that people want, especially on campus too, I don't know like how fast they want it though. And that's why you kind of see it earlier when I was talking about the Buildback Better Act. A lot of people want this, but they don't know how fast they want it.
Yeah.
So that's why there's a lot of turmoil in the party right now about that.
What's interesting is like I saw a lot of, and I don't know how credible this is because it's on Facebook, and you know, Facebook is what it is. And I've talked a lot in my time about like misinformation and like fake news. I had a whole thing about it. I worked on a couple of research projects on it, but one of the so like don't trust Facebook for anything pretty much. But one of the interesting things is like I love to see natural meme sharing, natural discourse happening on Facebook, and like I like seeing ideologies that are like completely competing against each other come into an inherent like underlying agreement. Like I don't know if you saw this meme or this post that was like circulating around Facebook even like to this day, where it talks about like it was like vaccine hesitancy, where they're like, oh, they want to give free vaccines but can't provide free insulin. That was like the Republican view on points, and like the Democratic response is like, no, we want to give free insulin too. We just like have to pass Medicare for all, and it's like we kind of want the same thing, but sometimes the phrasing and the branding and stuff puts us against each other. And I'm curious to see like how much outreach do like UDEMs, how much outreach do like Democrats in general do to like Republicans that are like on the verge of being on the center, or even, you know, skewing a little left, you know, like still on the right but skewing left. Like what's the outreach there? Because like in my personal experience, we tried to reach some of those like leaning left Republicans, but because it was during the Trump age, it was all or nothing, right? But like there's this fear that at some point we'll only be preaching to the choir, you know, and like only our people will be listening to our message, and like we're not grabbing the other people when we share some of the same underlying beliefs. They're just like phrased differently.
No, yeah, I mean I can't speak to UDEM just because I haven't gone through a primary season yet or an election season. When I just joined when we started, so I don't know like as far as like outreach we do. From what I've seen so far, and as being vice president, we don't really we don't get into high level detail of conversations with students. I mean, more so we're just like, here's a slip, vote.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the gist. We don't go like, I mean, sure we all individually join off for individual candidates, but as a campus, we're not going to like ingest or knocking on doors like, vote for this candidate. Like we don't do that. Probably we should, but I think nationally, um, I think the messaging is there, in that as long as we're talking to voters, we can get them to sway on our side for certain issues.
Yeah.
I think a really good example of this was Ground Game Texas,
Okay.
which they focus on. It was no knock warrants and marijuana, two like very popular, I guess, hot topic issues that I guess people support. No one wants someone just banging down your door
Right.
without like a warrant.
Yeah, regardless of what political party you are,
Yeah.
you just don't want people. Yeah.
And apparently there's a huge sentiment on, at least I don't know about legalizing marijuana in Texas, but at least decriminalizing it. So they like to use these two like issues that are pretty common, people agree with.
Yeah.
And they use that and they say like this is what we're pursuing. Please vote our way, or something to that effect. And that I think that is a good way to get moderates to sway over, rather than the extreme rhetoric from the other side.
Yeah, kind of like bait them in with it because, I mean, like public perception of marijuana, for example, is like, I think low key people have always been for it. I think low key, because like there's a lot of like, even like I've heard this from Republicans, like, oh, I used to smoke weed back in the day or whatever. Like I think low key people always were kind of for it. I think more publicly now, people are for it, like just like more in the like the public realm, and it's become more popular and people support it, which I think is great. Like I think that and like you said, no knock warrants are like a great way to like begin a conversation saying, hey, we're not as different as you might think. We're not as radical as you might think, and that goes both ways, right? I think that's a great like middle ground to start.
And I think if I can add another thing that's good too, is to focus. I guess to stay away from more of the social issues. They are important, yes, but especially with the majority that we have right now, I don't know if it's so wise to be focusing on social issues, hot topic issues.
Yeah.
I think most people really care about their money, economics. As long as we stick to those economic issues, and then when we expand our majority, then you can focus on those social issues, because I don't know if we necessarily have at least speaking for the Democratic Party, I don't know if we necessarily have a mandate to do that, especially with the 50-50 Senate mansion.
Yeah, and so at the same time we have that like 50-50 split, you don't want people to feel left out too, because like that only fuels more like opposition for next cycle, so yeah, I think it's great that we could start having these conversations about like marijuana, no knock warrants, how to get the economy, well, I don't know, getting back the economy to what it used to be is kind of still a little hot button, I guess, because of like approval ratings for the president, what governors are doing and this kind of thing, mandates against mandates, mandates blocking mandates or mandates for things. I think it's just having a conversation and like trying to run through the thought process of some of the things, because like, so what I've noticed is that and like, I mean, this is like a stereotypical Republican will like favor a company having the right to do whatever it wants, right? And then we see vaccine mandates from different companies, X company is implementing a vaccine mandate, and they're like, no, you can't do that. But it's like, don't do that. And it's like, why? And it's like finding out like the root cause of that issue, and then like building up from there, I think is a very beneficial conversation. But like, it's very difficult. Like, not everybody has the time, will, determination. But I think those are conversations that need to be had, and like, even if we start at marijuana where we agree and then build up to that, I think is great. But it's hard to do, and especially what we can capitalize on because we're young and we're students and stuff is the energy and that stuff we were talking about earlier. But I mean, even then, it's still difficult to do.
No, yeah, popular initiatives are good ways to get the conversation started. As long as you don't just start with like the hot topic issues, no, because if you start with that, I don't think anyone wants to speak with you. But if you ease your way in, I think it's people will be a lot more receptive. And I think it's a better way to go. It's good. What's the phrase here? It's acting in good faith. You want to have a genuine conversation rather than just try to poke a bear.
Yeah, and you can, I mean, when you start with like the right to choose, when we're speaking about abortion and stuff, like that's probably not a topic you should start on because that's like very infuriating. You know, like people have some very strong opinions on that. But I mean, like trying to like come into a conversation, not even a debate, a conversation where like you have like good faith, like you said. That's actually a term that's thrown around quite a bit in the debate, where it's like, are you coming in with good faith and like actually trying to like throw ideas out there and like have a conversation about those ideas. But yeah, you can tell very quickly when someone wants to have a good faith conversation and when someone doesn't. They're just like poking the bear, but like they're starting out, oh yeah, I'm good faith, but then you know you realize that they're just trying to like get a reaction out of you. I think most people aren't like that, but when we start on these hot button issues, like that's immediately what it turns to.
So have you ever seen like do you watch SNL?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not religiously, but I'll catch some monologues on YouTube afterwards.
So, did you see the one where it was like the school board, like they were like, I guess they were having like a school board meeting. Mm-hmm. You saw that one?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. So
was it a skit?
Yeah, it was a skit.
Okay, no, I haven't seen it.
So they go up there, and this guy, because it's a mock of this one guy from California, and he was this really insane, crazy person. I'll have to show you later.
Yeah.
But, you know, he just goes up there and in the skit, he just starts off as saying, like, Hillary, Barack Hussein, Obama. And, like, when you just start like that, like, no, just stop, please.
Yes.
No one wants that. It's not productive. It doesn't get anything done. And when you see, like making a joke of that, when you see ads from, like, Republicans that are, like, you know, Democrats are, like, socialists. Like, if they just start with socialism. For me... Because I'm not like a Bernie supporting Democrat. I would not vote for Bernie in the primary. But when you see something like that, I'm just like, no, that's not true. Not every Democrat is like, no, it's a big tent party.
Yeah. And so the issue with that too is that they don't necessarily understand what socialism is. They don't necessarily understand what like real communism is, and so it's really easy to just brand people as, oh, well, those Dems are just socialists or communists and stuff. And I don't know where, like, the failure is. Is it, like, in the education system? Or where is it that, like, maybe there's just, like, no, like, desire to actually learn what socialism and communism is. There's no desire to learn what fascism is so you can recognize, like, some of the indicators when you see a candidate doing things that other fascist candidates or other fascist leaders would do to recognize, hey, you know, he's not headed in the right track, you know, maybe we should back down. Or like even like the other way, you know, when you start noticing very like socialist things, not that socialism is bad, but or that fascism is pretty bad. I was gonna say, I was trying to defend the other side, but no, so fascism is pretty bad. But like I don't know where it is. Like people just, I guess, don't really care to like actually learn about it. It's so much easier to brand things and just leave it alone.
Well, I think there's two reasons why. Sorry, one reason is because like back in the 40s, when you know Joseph Stalin was in charge of Russia, there was a big scare of Russia, and I still think that scare of communist left-leaning politics kind of still scare America to this day. But also, I think that, you know, I think a Republican or a person like, well, maybe not like a Republican voter, but like the Republicans in office, I think they know what socialism actually is.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, to call everyone a socialist to get people riled up, I think it's good politics for them.
Yeah.
And that's why they do it, because it rallies their base. Yeah. And gets them to show up.
And so what's like very like devious of them, and like I'm not gonna say the Dems don't do it either.
No, yeah, I mean now after, you know, I'll say this: Jan 6 has given Democrats a lot of ammunition to call every Republican. You're gonna start seeing fascist ads like clips of Jan 6 and then the clip of the politician. Yeah. Do you want this person?
I've seen.
And I mean, and especially if they vote like in favor or against like stuff for the office or whatnot, like you'll see those ads. I'm sure they're already out.
And so it's like. It's very devious of both sides for them to do it, but like it's good. It's a good political strategy when you want to rile up your base. You know, you want to fire up your base. It's very saddening to me to see like that's what we have to resort to to
rather
be able
than policy.
rather than policy to get people. And like, yeah, I would venture to say a lot of people on the left also don't necessarily know what like real socialism and real communism is. We have these vague ideas from, like you mentioned, Stalin. We have these vague ideas from Cuba. We have these, vague ideas from like very socialist-ish countries.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know, like is New Zealand kind of like maybe Norway or
Yeah,
countries
like
that
like
are more
the-
socialized. Yeah, Sweden, I guess. We have like ideas of that, but like they don't really understand like what like the fundamentals of it are. And not saying like I'm an expert on it either, because I'm still learning as I go. And like they become very blanket terms to just rile up your base.
Yeah, I would be surprised if just like in the future we just say, okay, if you're left, you're socialist. If you're right, you're fascist. Like,
But I kind of felt like that this last election cycle. It almost kind of felt like that. Like it was just like we were so pinned against each
I mean,
other.
Donald would call Biden socialist. Biden's definitely not. Like,
Yeah.
no, he's very, very moderate. I'll say he's more progressive than maybe Obama, but he is he is not farthest from being socialist, and it's just, but it sells.
Yeah, it sells. Yeah, because I mean, we want to hear these like incendiary terms. We want to hear it, especially about the other person. And like after seeing January 6th, and like I've seen some ads, and like seeing someone like, I don't know. For me, it's very frustrating to then see like Matt Gaetz in a congressional hearing and like try to deny. Yeah, I know. Try to deny some of this crap. It's like, dude, like no one's falling for. I saw a recent one. I can't remember what representative was like questioning him. He's like, I know you too well. You're just like you're spilling crap. Like
no, it was one representative from Georgia, not Marjorie Taylor Greene, though she's crazy too. Yeah, but another one who was like, if I was there, or from the look at the videos, I think that this was just a normal tourist visit.
Yeah.
Like, I just wonder, like, do we see the same thing? Like, them bashing the cop with like a fire extinguisher or like their own shields, or like, did you hear the stories from the officer who was like, they pulled out my own gun and they were going to shoot it? They're like, are we hearing and seeing the same thing? What tourists do this?
Yeah, but like at some point you have to like defend your base, and that's all they're doing, and it's like, dude, that's not cool, and that's what's like really, really infuriating about it, because like you'll see people say that kind of stuff, and what I find interesting is I've also seen like commentators on YouTube and on social media and on the news and stuff say like put these clips right beside each other. It's like, oh, it's just a natural, like here's a normal tourist attraction, and then you see the destruction beside it. It's like you can obviously see the contradiction side by side, and like you don't want to attack people, but I think maybe showing some of that stuff would be very, very beneficial too. But that's very skewed. You would only do it for the other party. You would never do it for yourself, and that kind of like gets to the topic of like, well, how much good faith do you have, like coming into a debate? Like, how much do you actually like want to like concede? How much do you want to recognize as your own fault? Because we don't ever want to recognize it. Like, it was our fault that like. The Republicans will never say it's our fault. We incited this. We drove people we pushed them to that point.
It looks bad.
It looks bad. Yeah, and I don't know. Like sometimes I get very disappointed when I see that kind of stuff. But I guess it's just politics. Like that. I mean, throughout history, I hate saying vacant terms like that. Like throughout history, that happens. But I mean, it does. It's just politics.
No, yeah, and I think one more thing to that too is that I don't know if it was in our Congress class that we learned this, or my policy class, but like the American public's like attention span is very short. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Jan 6 was 10 months ago, and no one's talking about it that much. Like the only other time that our capital was ransacked like that was in 1814, or no, 1814 or 1812. Someone,
like 200 years ago. Yeah.
No one is talking about this. No one is talking about how they literally almost stopped the constitutionally mandated process of an election.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that just happens to be, and we'll start wrapping it up pretty soon so we don't bore everyone listening or watching, because I could talk for hours. I think one of the things is living in a post 9/11 world. I think it's just that, because like our generation is growing up with catastrophe upon historical event upon catastrophe upon historical event, like, and I mean, everyone is. You know, when you look back at like the things that happened in the '60s, people weren't really thinking, oh, this is going to be history and stuff. You know, but like I think now more than even then, we're just like living through a whole bunch of crap that like even if we wanted to pay like a bunch of attention to what's happening, one thing happened right afterwards, and like so January 6th happened. And then I can't even remember what happened after that. Like drew our attention away from it. But then we had the whole leaving Afghanistan thing.
Yeah.
And then it's that. And like this past week, it's a gun accidentally went off on the shooting of a movie. And it's like it's one thing after the other that like just keeps us going. And it's like I worry about what that does to like the national psyche in general.
Yeah, it's a lot of like decent. What's the word? Decent. I can't even say it, but
Desensitized.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
But
my words aren't the best.
Yeah, I have to read it out. But
yeah.
No, I think that after 4 years of President Trump, we've seen practically every other, every week or every day it was something new, a new law broken or a new scandal or whatever, that we just became like, oh, just another day. And apparently, Jan 6 was just another day. Another scandal.
What was crazy was like seeing it on TV was so crazy. It's like this is out of a movie, and it's like we've forgotten about it already, and there's a congressional hearing happening in the background, but does anybody really pay attention to it anymore? Like we've kind of formulated our opinions on it, and we're kind of forced to almost immediately. Like we're almost forced to like form an opinion on something and move on because something else happens.
No, I'm going to be very interested to see how 2022 plays out.
Yeah,
because obviously, if as effective, it's bring back up Jan 6. I'm sure Democrats will. I mean, if you look in Virginia, they're having their governor's race right now, and what happened in Texas because we passed the abortion law. Virginia's literally like, don't Texas Virginia or don't Virginia Texas or something like that. Don't put your laws on us. And it's just
Texas, Virginia.
And you just see that, and it's effective. It gets out. It gets the base out, and as that's like with Jan 6, if Democrats run on that and provide good policy, and pass our Buildback Better Act that we're dealing with now, they could have a pathway. But I depending on how midterms go, will really determine how much the American public cared about Jan 6.
I think so too, and I think passing the Buildback Better Act will be, and this is a very naive version of me saying this, will be very good for the country. I don't know like every component of it, but like some of the broad brushstrokes that I've heard about and some of the things I've read about, it's like it's gonna be really good, and like if that can get passed, everyone's gonna benefit. I feel like there's this ideology where like, oh, when Democrats pass something, it's gonna hurt everybody else. When Republicans pass something, it's gonna hurt everybody else. Which this last Texas cycle, there was kind of evidence for if Republicans pass something, it's gonna hurt other people with the voting suppression, with the abortion law, even like criminalizing homelessness. I don't know. This a couple months ago in Austin here, like. Those have real world impacts that are like kind of negative, I would say. But even then, like being open to saying, well, maybe not everything every Republican passes is going to be bad, although there's some evidence for it. And I mean, on the Democratic side, like this plan, I think is going to be really great, and it'll really help.
And it's extremely popular. The BIF, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, is widely popular. I mean, who doesn't like infrastructure? It's a big hot topic. Roads, bridges. Ports, internet, rail, very big important things people like. People don't like a pothole. People don't like driving in traffic. So it's popular legislation, and I think one thing I will give Biden credit for, while I'm not too happy with how the Buildback Better Act is turning out right now, and what was gutted from it, but the BIF will be very important because good politics, good legislation, expands your majority, hopefully. And with the Buildback Better Act, while though some good things were cut from it, it's still a pretty, well, no, I'm not gonna say good, but it's still a pretty
decent.
Decent.
Decent, yeah.
It does good work. Yeah.
It's like pointing towards a good direction. I think, and
it's a down payment.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, some of like the basic things there, like how do we get more internet to like rural cities and stuff? Like that's bipartisan. Like that's everybody needs internet, and like you want internet wherever you go. Like there's little things like that, like potholes. A pothole doesn't matter if you're Dem or R. It's annoying regardless. And some of those little things, if we can come together on that, if we can see the Senate, if we can see the House come together on that, I think we'll be headed in the right direction. So I'm really excited and really hoping that we can get this through.
No, yeah.
I think it's like steps towards a better future.
Yeah, and it was very good to see that. I think 18 Republicans crossed over and voted for the infrastructure bill, and I think that was like the last time that they're for like a big piece of legislation, not important, but a big piece of legislation passed with that much crossover from another party. I don't think that ever happened in Trump's administration.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And I don't think it happened in Obama's either after the ACA because of he lost the majority.
Yeah, which the ACA was so like beneficial in many aspects, but it drew a lot of backlash too. And we could talk for hours, but like if I could like kind of start to wrap this up, I think what we were talking about right now is like one of the most important things. Like if we can, and it's kind of been like a theme that's I guess woven into it. If we can like find where we can agree in the middle, infrastructure, whether that be like roads, internet, bridges, just keeping like parks clean, all these little things, decriminalization, of marijuana, no-knock warrants. If we can like start to talk about these things that we agree about in the middle, and then grow from there, I think that's going to be the best for us right now. Coming out of a period where we were so divisive, where we were so us against them against us, Trump against democracy. If we can say, you know what, that's behind us. Obviously, the people that did January 6th and the people that follow that ideology, especially the people that participated in it, need to be prosecuted accordingly. But like everybody else that was just like watching on the sidelines, hey, we agree on some things. Let's actually try to build back better.
Yeah, build back better from the pandemic.
Yeah.
And recover from the horrible, the worst parts of the pandemic, and have a better America as we proceed forward.
And that's always the plan. That's always the goal. Like, how do we become better? And even though, like, quality of life gets better as new inventions and things come out, so like our relationships just need to get better. Like it seems as if we're like just continuing to antagonize each other. So yeah, coming out of the pandemic, trying to be more friendly to people. I'm very hopeful and excited for 2022 and 2024 because I think some really great things are going to come out of it. If we keep some momentum going, if we can meet in the middle, if we can talk about these things and forget about the last 5-6 years, I think some great things will be headed this way.
Yeah, as Matthew McConaughey said, I think that's a good way to quote, or a good way to stop and quote on Matthew McConaughey. He says America's going through growing pains. Yeah. I mean, we're only 249 years old, I think, somewhere around there. So, I think this is just like a trail phase that we're going through, and eventually we'll go back on, be as good as like maybe the 50s or 60s again. I mean, every decade has its challenges. I think very good things are going to come out of it. Have you read his book? No, I've not read Green Lights.
I recommend it. I've only gotten a couple pages in, but it's a very interesting perspective. I recommend it. I don't know if I haven't followed his thoughts about running for office or not, if he would or would not. Independent of that, the book is pretty good. I recommend it.
No, yeah, I have to check it out. I don't think he's running, but I'll check the book out. Yeah, it's on my reading list.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. But anyways, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know we've talked for, over an hour for sure. We've been recording for almost an hour, but I know we talked for over an hour, so I appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to me about politics. I could talk for hours. So.
Yeah, no, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. Sweet.